I got a thought of Bard walking around, seeing a stone, picking it up, moving it left a few inches, and being like, ah, there it is, and then moving on. And we don't know what that means, but he knows what's going on.
Oh my god. Okay, so officially from now on, I was like, because that just made me think of the Sailor Moon meme with Tuxedo Mask. And so now I'm just gonna refer to Bard as Tuxedo Mask, just like moving a rock. There, my work here is done. But you didn't do anything. Whips his cape and is off to the next adventure.
And welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 87. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Hetch.
Oh my goodness! And we get to have more just champion spotlights. Like we've done it. We're away from the Stardians.
I know, right? Even though there's some mentions in here about some first Starlight that may still be relevant.
Oh,
I know Hedge is
oh,
having a heart attack. Oh no.
gods! No, the Starlight.
Something that hasn't changed, housekeeping. That's always there. And you can listen to us everywhere. You can send us an email at podcastcore@gmail.com. You can visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. Then follow us on any platform you prefer or all the platforms because that would help us with discoverability, and we appreciate that. Leave us a like, comment, or a short review. But the easiest way is to tell one friend to hear the sounds of creation by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
I I love the emphasis on podcast there. Like, yeah, don't go to the independent film study.
Yeah.
We're the podcast.
Like Bard.
We don't associate with the independent film guys.
Exactly. Like Bard, you can only hear us. You can't see us. But yeah, today we're talking about the man himself. We wanted to do this episode for a while. The way the releases have been going, this has been the best opportunity to start getting outside of, the boots on the ground type approach to characters, where we get to talk about more ethereal things. Obviously, we recently talked about Ornn. Listen to that episode because that also has some relevance here, him being a demigod, etc. But today we're going to talk about the Celestial. Even though in the game, in Legends of Runeterra, he's not referred to as a Celestial type card, he is a Celestial, so just keep that in mind as we talk about things today.
And with him being a celestial, it's also worth mentioning that we touch on these in some of our older episodes, like Aurelian Soul and Zoe. So he's kind of in that same party, but he's very, very different. Very
Yeah.
different. But let's talk about what we like with the world there, which is some cards, and
Yeah, start us off.
and so with Bard, we have like a really cool mechanic, which is the chimes, or
Mhm.
essentially placing boons inside of your deck. And I, for one, am a sucker for this kind of gameplay because it harkens back to like the old school Hearthstone hand buff cards.
Yeah.
So I definitely had a ton of fun putting really dumb decks together. But so a couple of my favorite cards to go with that, the spell is going to be Cosmic Binding. So this is a 5 mana fast speed spell, and it has deal 2 to an enemy and stun another enemy, and then plant 6 chimes on random cards in your deck. So the chimes, they work pretty much like Teemo traps, except for your deck. So you have to draw into them, and when you trigger one of these quote unquote traps, when they're in your own deck, they're called boons in the mechanics. And when you trigger one of these boons, it will give a random follower or champion in your hand +1/+1. So that works entirely from hand. It doesn't go onto the battlefield or anything unless a card says otherwise. But that aside, this card is not bad. Like it's pretty flexible. Like you've got a stun, which is going to be really good for if you're kind of playing a little bit more mid-rangey to control, and being able to deal 2 damage to something is not terrible. And the fact that it also is spread out, so that way you're not necessarily having to damage the same unit that you're stunning is cool. I can say just from experience, because I've played with this a lot, that it's a little frustrating because you do have to have 2 targets. You can't do the 2 damage and the stun to the same thing, and the UI it gets really wonky if you want to just stun a unit, and there's only one unit on board. But the card's very flexible. It's pretty good. And for our purposes, it has flavor. And I love the flavor text on all the cards for Bard because the fact that he's a celestial, there's not really a lot of physical evidence of Bard's existence.
Yeah.
And so we get a lot of these stories that are really just conversations, and it's that beginning of how legends are born. So the flavor text on Cosmic Binding is a conversation between a mother and child. And it's, Mama, where does the caretaker go? He goes everywhere, love, as far as the eye can reach. But why? Ah, my sweet, do not think on why. Not even our wisest elders can understand the caretaker's ways. And it like that's the stuff that I love because that's how all these legends get born even in real life, is that it's word of mouth, these stories that you tell your kids when they're going to bed, and they just grow and grow into legend.
Yeah, once again, this is a similar flavor to what we talked about in our Orn episode. And this specific quote is important because this mother and child will play into our story episode when we talk more about Bard. But take us to the man with the biggest grin,
Oh
Maduli.
man. All right, so if you want some nightmares, just open the full art on this. Just stare into Maduli, the gatekeeper's soul. Um,
Spirited Away, anybody?
oh man, this has such Ghibli vibes to it. It's so good. But so Maduli the Gatekeeper is a 6 mana follower, 4/6, and he has, when I'm summoned, plant a chime on the top card of your deck. Then double the boons in your deck. So this, especially when we get to Bard, it will be really apparent how much of like a basically a must play this card is with Bard, because of the fact that you're playing for value. You're trying to get value in your hand, and the best way of getting, if you're playing for value, you want to keep getting value. So all this value you've already built up, why not double it? Hey! Uh, and it's also, this is a really cool card for it too, because it puts a chime on the top card of your deck, so you know that the next draw you're going to be triggering these boons. And if you have cards in play that have effects that go along with that, it's really important to have. But the flavor is really sums up the art of this card. Uh, so again, open the art, stare into the soul, be terrified that it stares back. Okay, now that you're terrified, the quote on this one is from an old story. So again, more word of mouth stuff.
Yeah.
And this is from Old Gaff, and he says, "Gave me a right fright it did, arms sprouting all over, teeth big as boulders. Oh, and when that creature ran that mallet across its teeth, made a song so eerie, thought I'd die. Ran for my life I did, but not before I seen it. Holes in the sky, must have been hundreds of them." So one is like it sums up the look of this like perfectly. If I ran into this thing out in the wild, yeah, no, I wouldn't be staying to figure out what it's doing either. I don't care that it's playing music off of its teeth. Get me away from me. But it does also show that like that Maduli does have like a very strong connection to Bard, because it seems that he's capable of opening up portals for more celestials to come into the world of Runeterra, which is very interesting. Like is Bard, like, is this an essence of Bard, or is Bard just one of many different kinds of caretakers? These are things that we don't really know yet. But it, we have Maduli, and he will haunt my dreams.
When I think about Meduli, and this is going to be a very timely reference, we're cross-cultured here. So recently, spoilers for any Silent Hill fans, we had a new trailer come out for Silent Hill F. It is a
Whoa!
terrifying trailer for the future of that series, but there is the sound design and the song choice for that trailer is very airy and very unique, and you should check it out and think about that when you think about Meduli Space. Terrifying.
Yeah. I'm like, and it really is just like, I just want, if someone listening to this is like art inclined, we officially need fan art of like the pyramid head with Maduli, and Maduli just like playing a song on pyramid head.
Yeah. So let's get into our main topic right now of the champion himself, Bard. So the name of this episode is Wonderwall by Oasis, because that's what I think is the song playing during the creation of Runeterra, where
I'm
Bard's
leaving.
like, wait, what's that sound? Oh,
And
baby,
after all,
you're gonna be the one that saves me.
Bard is a Wonderwall. I'm leaving. I can't do this. How dare you bring Oasis into this?
So, as we mentioned, Bard is a celestial, but not represented as that in the game. But he's unique from different celestials, right? We've talked about other celestials before. Listen to all of our stuff. They're there, especially the Targon stuff. But he perceives the world differently. He perceives it through sound rather than sight. But think of it like Daredevil. Like his sound is so good that it becomes sight, right? It's kind of obscure because he is ethereal. But before sound was created, he was essentially flying blind through the cosmos with no physical form. And then the forging of the first stars began, which is our reference to some Star Guardian stuff because that comes up a lot in that side universe. But he's floating, essentially blind, and as he's traveling through what began to be these resonance of sound from these stars being created, the first meeps started to pop up and follow him. And the meeps are essentially incomplete motes of energy. And we'll talk about their life cycle later on and in the subsequent episode. But they began to follow him. And that was Bard, as not as we know it completely, but the concept of Bard.
Yeah, and it is really cool as far as just getting to see the beginning of Bard because it's a lot more ethereal in comparison to the other Celestials that we've talked about, especially like Aurelian Soul, or Zoe, where they the fact of the way that they interacted with the world made them feel a little bit more corporeal as far as just in storytelling, whereas with Bard it really is just sound, and he's even there with the first sounds of the universe. So, like, he it gives just this kind of like a cloud feeling.
Yeah.
If there's any Futurama fans out there, it's like what I imagine of like when Bender finds God,
Yeah.
and it's just this empty space that's like vibrating, and he understands it. Like that's Bard to me at this point. But the let's push forward because I still don't get meeps. I'm not gonna lie to you. I still don't get meeps. So
Don't worry, I got you, bro. I got you.
hopefully if I just hear it in your words,
Yeah.
I'll get it. So let's push forward.
Okay. So he begins to hear an unfamiliar, more rough, primitive symphony sort of sound, and he decides to investigate, right? He's just as curious as any other god, demigod, celestial. So he goes looking for it and he stumbles across what is early Runeterra. And I have a note here that says that I believe the relation to this is around Orin's story because this is probably around the time the Hearthblood first started appearing. Because that's up to this point in the episodes, this is the first time we have like an early primitive people that are active and connected with some kind of godly sort. So I think that's what he's hearing. And Orin is doing things that are causing like mountains to rise and all that stuff. So that makes sense, right? That kind of aligns with this beginning of a new world. So he's immediately interested, right? This new sound, he begins to investigate deeper, enhance. So, it's beautiful to him, but despite this beauty, he notices that the song is becoming sort of destructive. Once again, I think this is referencing the Volibear incident, right? Like these are the early times of conflict. So he decides, you know what? I'm done just looking from afar. I'm going to intervene.
I mean, as far as with the destructiveness, like it definitely could be the Volibear incident, or we've covered a lot of different champions here. So we have
Yeah.
the Ruination 2.0, and the Ruination 3.0. Like, there's definitely a lot that could be like what is dragging Bard over here
Yeah.
as far as just like this destruction. But it's really cool because the destruction to Bard is that it's a loss of sound.
Yeah.
So it's this song is disappearing, but it's also interesting to him because what's there is independent from everything else. So we get this understanding now that like the universe outside of Runeterra is kind of has a harmony to it, whether it be like life living within harmony, or the maybe perhaps even like a lack of life, and it's life that makes Runeterra so different. Um, so it's really interesting the fact that like Bard is dragged over here just because like Runeterra is so different from everything else,
Yes.
and we don't really know what makes it so different. We can just have speculation, but I definitely think Ornn burning half of the Freljord and Volibear blowing it up with lightning that could do it.
Yeah.
That tracks. I feel like that would bring anybody
It's like your
to the
neighbors hear
planet.
enough noise to call the cops.
Yeah. Just like, how many gunshots was that? That's it. I'm calling.
So we now get the final step to the Ornn that we know from the games. Bard, or sorry, not the Ornn, Bard. See, I'm thinking about Ornn now, Ornn on the brain. No,
We were excited about Ornn, damn it.
we're beyond demigods. We're in celestial territory now. So Bard enters the material realm and he lands in what is the first lands of Ionia. We do know historically in Runeterra, Ionia is one of the oldest areas as far as being known as such. And he creates this simple body from trinkets and fabrics that he finds on a traveling wagon. And this gives him that look, right? That you know the iconic, kind of creepy look. Not Meduli creepy, just creepy enough.
Not Meduli creepy. There's so little out there that's Meduli creepy.
So for a long time, he's walking around the world. He's noticing these convergences of many complex powers. And these powers were disrupting the natural cosmic order of things. And he starts to create a theory. He thinks that there's other powers in the celestial realm that play some part in this disruption, but they're unknown on what their purpose is. Because remember, when you think about these aren't gods, these are celestials. So I guess they are technically gods, but they don't really walk the plains of Runeterra. So, what could be their goal for this quote unquote experiment, right? We'll talk more about that in upcoming episodes.
And the with Bard coming into Ionia, like one of the key things as far as this transformation into the character that we recognize, as far as the
Yeah,
physical form, is that the mask that he wears. And a little bit of a spoiler behind the scenes is that we are working on like some content that will go deeper into that, but the culture of masks and spirits in Ionia is super strong, and it goes through a lot of the lore for specifically Ionia
yeah,
and even some of the other champions that are there. Like there's a big significance as far as the spirits around like that the physical realm cannot perceive, and masks to represent them. So the fact that Bard, is just grabbing a bunch of random crap off of this cart
yeah.
and dons a mask. Bard doesn't know any of this stuff. He's just trying to figure out what is that, who's off key. Like that's all he cares about. But the fact that he dons that mask really begins the possibility for Ionians to start building this legend around this caretaker, because there's like this spirit that's floating around and he has a terrifying best friend, but they won't hurt you.
So Bard, like Orn, kind of likes to keep things simple. Even though he has this big grand theory, his goal is still the same. He wants to take anything out of place and return it to where it can do no further harm, which for mere mortals is very ambiguous. But it just reminds me, like immediately I got a thought of Bard walking around, seeing a stone, picking it up, moving it left a few inches, and being like, ah, there it is, and then moving on. And we don't know what that means, but he knows what's going on.
Oh my god. Okay, so officially from now on, I was like, because that just made me think of the Sailor Moon meme with Tuxedo Mask. And so now I'm just gonna refer to Bard as Tuxedo Mask, just like moving a rock. There, my work here is done. But you didn't do anything. Whips his cape and is off to the next adventure.
So, Bard's goal, just to remind you guys, is just to keep the universe in tune, right? Or get it back in the tune that he liked so much. And he can see, hear, quote unquote, the future. So he knows that there's a great conflict coming and it's going to involve everybody, not just the mortal realm. And as he awaits that, the twist here is that he's still not sure what side he'll be on. And that's where the theories start to come in. But before we get there, we're going to talk about the card because the card has some stuff here. And Bard is
I
an
love this
interesting card, like Hedge
I
said.
love this card.
Yeah. He introduced another mechanic into the game. So Bard is a 4-cost 2/5, which fits his build. And his origin is the Wandering Caretaker. And when he attacks, he plants 3 chimes on random cards in your deck. And his level up requirement is that you've increased the total stats of allies in play or hand by 20 plus, which isn't hard when you're building a Bard deck.
Yeah. And this is also fun because it's the first character that we're covering that has an origin. So as far as in the world of the card game of Runeterra, Bard is not assigned to a region. Despite the fact that he's landing on Ionia, he is independent of a region. So a character with origin, like they just have Runeterra as their region, and they can play cards that match their origin from any region.
Yeah.
So there are some cards that will be from Ionia and some cards that are from Targon. And as long as you are playing with Bard in your deck, you can grab those cards from anywhere, quote unquote.
Yep.
But that's all that the origin is there. Some of the other Runeterra characters, their origins have different effects on it, and so for Bard's other effect is that if you have 3+ mana gems, plant a chime in your deck for each Bard that started the game in your deck. So that that is what the origin is that it's Bard's region, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the front of Bard's card, the first piece of the quote here for the flavor, and this is related to Hetch's previous mentions of old Gaff's stories. Hey, old Gaff's seen his share of strange. First time was the caretaker himself, I reckon. Like a star streaming across the sky, he was. Felt like the whole world stopped a minute, and it was just me and him. That's part one.
That was perfect. That was perfect. I want you to record a voicemail message for me.
Old prospector looking for
Yeah.
gold. That's your motivation.
Yeah.
Action.
Hatch is not available. Take your call.
Yeah, doggy. You just done missed me. All right, so then on the Wandering Caretaker origin Hetch mentioned, there's also some good flavor text here, which references what we talked about. It says, a mysterious traveler from beyond the cosmos, Bard is a being of harmony and balance whose ear is attuned to the symphony of creation and the discord within. Surrounded by a choir of peculiar creatures known as meeps, which Hetch doesn't understand, the Wandering Caretaker's curious works are celebrated in songs and stories across Runeterra.
Look, okay, look. There are chimes, and there are meeps. All right. And that officially means that it's one thing more than I'm ready to understand. So in my brain, I'm like, oh, meeps or chimes.
All right, so let's, we're gonna read. There's chimes here as well. Let's read that quote too, just to have Hatch. Would you want to do me the favor? You got it up.
You monster. Do I have chimes up? I don't
Oh,
have chimes up,
all right. On
so
still
save me.
windless nights, cast your eyes to the heavens and listen for the soft symphony of twinkling chimes. In the moment, you will know that he is watching. Kind of cultish, but it's Bard, so it's friendly. It's not. It's not like that.
Yeah. I mean, like if something's called a caretaker, I'm not really going to be terrified if they're watching over me.
Yeah.
Like this just kind of gives the American Christian vibe.
Yeah.
He's watching us always.
So we finally get the flipped side of Bard. He's a lot of related cards, so this is why it takes a while. But there's a lot of good content here. He's a 4-cost still, and he's a 3/6. So remember, in his picture and in the game, he's a pretty big boy. He has a dumpy on him. We're not surprised.
Yeah, and he's gonna get a seal on both cheeks. Like that's like he's earned it.
So when he's flipped, he has on attack, plant 6 chimes on a random cards in your deck, and when you activate a chime, grant +1/+1 to random allies in play. But the quote here is, sound the horn for the young and the old, sound it loud for all to behold. Kings bow down and sing their praise to the caretaker and his curious ways. The Runeterran ballad. And music obviously plays a part in this. When we talk about the story, we'll mention that as well, because what good, tale is told in the past than with music, right? And it fits so well with Bard.
And it's also like this kind of finishes the picture of watching this legend grow.
Yeah.
Because we get to follow Bard from like the first time that he takes a physical form in Runeterra. And if you haven't caught on when we talk about these celestials and demigods, they're old. So like this is clearly a song that is now like probably like thousands of years later, like generations of people later. It's like, well, my grandpappy and his grandpappy before him and his grandpappy before him, they sang this song at the turning of harvest moon every year.
Oh no, he said the words. New game? Question mark?
Huh? 2023 release? Huh? What? All right. If we make it official on our podcast, they have to come out with it.
Your move, Nintendo. But to end this episode, some theories. Hetch, I think, covered it earlier, where we talked about, Bard saying he has to pick a side at some point. And there's so many calamitous events that happen in Runeterra. We don't really know when that moment is, which kind of keeps you on your toes, but we'll get into that in our story episode. So for now, as always, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Yeah, and take care and watch out for Maduli.